I'm glad that I'm going first because I don't have to compete with much more esteemed speakers here. But being a teacher, I would like to make it interactive. So before I share my thoughts on the Gita, I would like to ask this question: what do you think Gita is all about? If you had to answer this question in a single word or 2 or 3 words maximum, what would you say the Gita is all about?
Detachment.
Detachment, okay. Any other thoughts?
The way of life.
Way of life, okay.
Glory of Lord Krishna.
Glory of Lord Krishna. Any other?
Answers for all questions.
Answers to all questions. Okay. So we got few responses here. Detachment. The Gita definitely speaks about detachment. In fact, many people define Hinduism as a way of life, but everything is a way of life, right? Being a professor is a way of life. Being a physician is a way of life. Being a rock star is a way of life. So it doesn't help much. If I had asked this question, many people would say it's all about dharma. Some would say it's all about moksha. Some would say it's all about detachment. I think all these answers are right, but I think they still do not capture up what Gita essentially is. Pardon me? Yeah. Again, I would agree that the Gita discusses all these things. So, for instance, I'm in the engineering school, and in the engineering school they teach calculus, they teach algebra, but the engineering program is not about algebra. The engineering program is not about calculus. The engineering program is about creating engineers, right? So I think the Gita is about stress management. Why I'm saying that? Because the first chapter, essentially we have Arjuna, who is highly stressed out. He is having a mental breakdown. And many interpreters have talked about Gita in symbolic terms. Again, I don't think there is anything wrong with interpreting the Gita in symbolic terms. But we also need to analyze Gita in very literal terms. I think there is a lot of importance when we analyze Gita in symbolic terms. But for instance, all of you, especially the married people here, you have some symbols either in form of a ring or Mangal Sutra that symbolizes your marriage. But the symbol is not more important than your partner, right? So I think symbolism is important, but even more important is the literal message that we are getting. And the reason I'm saying stress management is the key message here is because we have Krishna here advising Arjuna to deal with his stress. If it was about anything else, if it was about dharma, if it was about detachment, then this entire episode of Gita could have been placed somewhere else. So Arjuna is not asking Krishna to give him some insights about detachment. Arjuna is not asking him to give him some insights about paradharma. Arjuna is not asking him to give any of these details. Arjuna is in a horrible state. He is having a mental breakdown. So if I won't recite the slokas. I'm not as good in Sanskrit as you guys are. But so the English translation says these are slokas 28, 29, and 30 from chapter 1. So my limbs are giving away. My mouth is getting parched. A shiver runs through my body, and my hair is standing. All signs of stress, all signs of extreme stress. The Gandiva is slipping out of my hand. My skin is burning. So these are all those who are familiar with the fight and flight response. These are all signs of stress. Now, if Gita is about stress management, then it should give us some insights about what is causing that stress. So the first chapter again has 5 characters that we can see. So there is Arjuna, there is Duryodhana, there is Dhritarashtra, Sanjay, and Krishna. These are the 5 characters that do get introduced in or do get featured in the first chapter. And Dhritarashtra, of course, is also very stressed. He is worried about how his kids are doing. So, as you all know, the first shloka starts with Dhritarashtra Vacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsava Mamakaha Pandavashaiva Kim Kurvat Sanjaya. So, again, you guys are all familiar with the interpretation of it, but the focus here is on Mamakaha. So, how are my sons doing in comparison to Pandava's sons? So focus is on me. So this is what we call self-referential thinking, technically. And by self-referential thinking, so it's in a way narcissistic thinking. We are focused on ourselves. And there is something called the default mode network. Those who are physicians here will be familiar with the default mode network. And the default mode network is essentially the activity that we see in our brain in a network of reasons that is always active. So if I gave you a problem of calculus and you're focusing on working on that problem, there will be certain regions in your brain that do get more oxygen, gets more activation. But in comparison, during the normal hours, about 95 to like 96, 97% of the brain is constantly active. So that is what we call the default mode network. Now the enlightened people, the master meditators, are the ones whose default mode network is not as active as us normal folks. So if especially the time they are meditating, but even when they are not meditating, their default mode network is not active. The level of activation is much lower than us common folks. So what research shows is that people who have a highly activated default mode network, they engage in a lot of this self-referential thinking. And not just that, they also experience, the more activated your default mode network is, the more self-referential thinking you engage in, plus the more stress you feel. It's much more likely that you will be feeling anxious, it's much more likely you will be feeling stressed, it's much more likely that you will be feeling depressed. So what's the first word of the Bhagavad Gita? What's the first word of the Bhagavad Gita? Dharma, actually it's Dhritarashtra, right? Dhritarashtra Vacha, right? So yes, I think many people when they interpret the Bhagavad Gita, they say that the first word is dharma and the last word is mama, so it is about mama dharma, right? So my dharma, we're figuring out my dharma. I think that is one interpretation, but the interpretation that I would like to give is, the first word is Dhritarashtra, who is all about mama, and all about me, all about my children, and the last word is again mama. So again, it gives us the insight that how all this stress is happening because of we having this self-referential thinking. So and if we again analyze Duryodhana, he is also stressed. If we go through the shlokas carefully, we see that when he's speaking with Bhishma, despite he having a much bigger army, he feels his army is insufficient or not enough. Paryaptam on the play of words. So he is a person again highly stressed because of engaging in social comparison, being envious. Envy is something that I do my research on. That was my doctoral dissertation on. And people who are envious are again highly self-focused, and so they want to be better than others, but they feel they aren't. So it's a lot of self-referential thinking that leads to such high amount of stress. But in comparison, Sanjaya, he is not stressed, right? He's pretty equanimous. But why is he equanimous? It's like, you know, let's say Dr. Mantravadi's, what phone do you have, sir? iPhone. So he has a probably expensive iPhone, and if it falls and it cracks, then he probably will be a little stressed or maybe a little unhappy. Liking Dr. Mantravadi, maybe will feel a little bit bad about him. But not as stressed as probably he will be, right? Okay. But you know, if we hear about some Mr. X, imagine you read in the news that somebody cracked his cell phone and that's on news. And you will say, this is news. That person may be highly stressed, but we wouldn't be stressed, right? So Sanjay has no personal investment in the entire process, like Dhritarashtra has, like Duryodhana has. Sanjay is equanimous, so it is easy for him not to feel stressed. Now Arjuna, of course, is stressed. Is extremely stressed, and the reasons that he provides for why he's stressed seems like he's a very ethical guy, but if we analyze his statements, we realize that it's the reasons that he provides aren't actually the valid reasons why he's stressed. He says that I will be accruing sin as if he had never killed before, so when we analyze those shlokas, we realize that he is concerned about his race, about his progeny, right? That family will become corrupt, the women will become corrupt, especially after in the battle, people dying and the men dying. So again, he also has a lot of self-referential thinking, due to which he is stressed. So Krishna is the only guy who isn't, even though he is also embedded in the battle, like he's Kunti's nephew. So he should be stressed, but he isn't. In fact, he is the person who had a pretty miserable life in terms of life circumstances. But he's never stressed. He's extremely happy, jolly good fellow kind of guy. So again, in disagreement with what Vish was saying, I would say the entire Gita, not just the first six chapters, all the 18 chapters, including Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, or Jnana Yoga, all are ultimately about how we succeed in dealing with the challenges of life without getting stressed. So outcome independence is what is discussed in Karma Yoga. Bhakti, so we surrender to a higher power, so we are not focused so much on self. That again helps with reducing the self-referential thinking. And meditation is all about reducing the activity level in the default mode network, which then ultimately helps enhance our ability to deal with stress. So that's essentially what I think the Gita is about. Thank you. Hope you found this valuable.